Good afternoon. And welcome. This is amazing to see this church/theater so full of people. And there's a Packer game going on. Thank you so much for choosing to come here to see Cooney Goes Over There. We have been working on this play since April. It's been an amazing journey. Anytime we asked anyone to help, they said yes, including this church, including all of our actors who are working full-time and have families and would probably want to watch the Packer game too. So we're so lucky and we're so blessed. Thank you for coming today. My name is Rebecca Seymour, and I'm the director. And it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey. We're so grateful. As a way to give back, any free will donations offered today will benefit the Fisher House Foundation of Wisconsin. We are grateful that our special guest, Dirk Debbing, is here today to tell you a little more about this organization that is dedicated to helping local veterans and their families. Dirk is a lifelong resident of Oconomowoc with a 35-year career in the Navy, active and reserve. He retired from the Navy in 2012 and focused on the family business MSI General, designing and building commercial facilities. With a passion for veterans and their care, Dirk joined the Fisher House of Wisconsin board 4 years ago. Dirk and his wife, Terry, have 4 children, 3 who are serving our country, 2 in the Navy and 1 in the Foreign Service. They also have 7 grandchildren. I would love for Dirk Debbing to come up to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Becky, and thank you all for coming out this afternoon. Happy Veterans Day to all the veterans, and I know many of you are veterans. Are we going to have them stand up later, Becky? Or okay, that'll come a little bit later. But Happy Veterans Day from a veteran. I just want to say a few words about the Fisher House. As Becky said, I joined the board about 4 years ago. It is an amazing organization. It's an amazing home away from home for our veteran families at the VA in Milwaukee. The house is about 13,000 square feet, has 16 apartments in it, and veterans' families will stay there free. They aren't charged a dime, and while their veterans are being treated over at the hospital. As you might know, the VAs have divided up across the country, and they all have different specialties, and so many times our veterans have to travel far away to get the treatment that they need at a particular VA, and that's why these Fisher Houses become so important. There's about 80 of them now. I think there's 5 overseas, the other 75 are here in the United States. And just 2 quick things that amaze me about the Fisher House. First of all, the stories you hear, and of course we hear many of them being on the board, of the impact that that house has and the ability for families to come and stay near their veteran. It ranges from perhaps the veterans literally that's their last days in the hospital, and the family's able to be there and comfort the veteran as the veteran passes. It's just so emotional. The other side of it, you'll have a veteran that'll come to Milwaukee, perhaps thinking they might not go home, but because the family is there nearby, that veteran has the strength and the love from that family that we've actually seen them get better when we didn't think they would, and they get to go home with their families. So we appreciate all of the support we've gotten from Milwaukee. That's the other most amazing thing. The entire Milwaukee area, the donations that we've received to build the house and now to continue operating the house and be able to provide for the veterans' families who are there. Some of the things are obvious, like food and games for the kids and things like that. But other things are less obvious. For example, the VA now supplies everything to the Fisher House that it absolutely needs, like toilet paper, paper towel. Who knows what kind of toilet paper the government issues? It's not the kind that you and I have at home. So we actually literally buy them toilet paper so they'll have, that kind of a home comfort at the Fisher House. So every dime helps. I think there's some jars out there. Thank you very much for your support of just an amazing cause and supporting our veterans. Thanks much. And then, Pastor Dave.
My name's Dave Schnepp. I serve as a senior pastor here at First Congregational, and it's indeed a privilege to welcome all of you to our play this afternoon. We welcome you, and we're honored and delighted that you're here with us. I've been asked to begin our play with an invocation. So I'm going to ask you to bow your heads and your hearts with me for a short word of prayer, please. Loving and gracious God, we've gathered here as part of the community of Oconomowoc. We ask that you would bless our writers, directors, actors, performers, all who have gathered for a time of remembrance and recollection. We pray this day for the servicemen and women who have died in the violence of war, each one remembered and known by you. God, grant them peace. And we pray for all members of the armed forces who are in danger this day, remembering their family and friends and all who wait for their safe return. God, grant peace to the civilian women and children whose lives are disfigured by war and violence, calling to mind in penitence the anger and hatreds of humanity. We pray for the peacekeepers, for those who seek to keep peace in this world secure and free. We pray for all who bear the burden of leadership. We ask for gifts of wisdom and commitment in the search for reconciliation and for peace. God of truth and justice, we hold before you those whose memory we cherish this day and those whose names we will never know. Help us to lift our eyes above the torment of this broken world. And as we honor the past, may we put our faith in your future, for you are the source of all life and hope, now and forevermore. Amen.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lynn Carlstein. I am the choir director at Silver Lake Intermediate School, and behind me you see the Silver Lake Intermediate 7th and 8th grade encore choirs. But also with them, you see the community choir, of which I am also the conductor, and I invite all of you to join if you're feeling so moved once you hear us today. And what we have over here is the 8th grade encore band, and we are all joining forces to present a piece called Our America. Music is one of the most unifying forces in the universe. It is so powerful. And from Yankee Doodle to Lee Greenwood's God Bless the USA, this medley has themes that have pulled us along as a country throughout time. So without delay, Our America.
America.
And I would like to extend our thanks to Kaylee Hilby and the band again for coming out to do this. Thank you, Kaylee, for joining us. Team efforts are fun. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Cooney Goes Over There. My name is Dale Reich. I wrote Cooney Goes Over There, and I'm happy to see so many people here to share it with me and with my good friends in the cast here today. Let our friends get off the stage here also. Just one thing I want you to know about, and that is that following the performance, there will be a reception in the fellowship hall, so please do join us for some food and for some drinks and the opportunity to talk to members of the cast. Obviously, I'm your narrator for this afternoon as well. It was called the Great War. It was called the War to End All Wars. You and I know it as World War I. It began in 1914 with the assassination of an archduke, and it didn't end until 4.5 years later, when the United States entered the war and forced Germany to surrender on November 11, 1918. 100 years ago today, and just a few hours ago, that 11 a.m. armistice took effect. In fact, I'm going to pause right now. It used to be called Armistice Day, and now it's called Veterans Day. We have some feedback here, guys? Okay. That's better. Okay. Used to be called Armistice Day, now it's Veterans Day. So we're going to pause right here and please ask if any of you have served in uniform for your country. All of the veterans in the audience, members of the current armed forces, please stand up and be recognized now, here on your day. Ladies and gentlemen, very, very much. We appreciate what you have done for your country's freedom. The United States entered the war in 1917, and it was indeed a total war. Here in the United States, total mobilization meant that most men, women, and children were going to make some sort of sacrifice or contribution to the war effort. They would do everything from buy war bonds to recognize meatless Mondays or wheatless Wednesdays, of all things. The war brought changes that have profoundly affected the United States in many, many ways. All parts of the United States, including this little community called Oconomowoc. It was 4,000 residents. It was a mostly German community, and it showed its support for the war in a wide variety of ways. And depending upon how you draw the line around Oconomowoc to define the Oconomowoc community, up to a dozen men from this city, this town, gave their lives in World War I. All told, about 122,000 people participated in the war directly from the state of Wisconsin, and about 4,000 of them made the ultimate sacrifice. So let's go back now. Let's go back 100 years to 1918 to see this conflict through the eyes and through the ears of those who actually lived it, whether they were here in Oconomowoc or whether they were overseas fighting in Europe. While the following dramatic depictions do borrow from the realm of fiction, for the most part, what you're going to see here this afternoon is fact. We have a reasonably accurate picture thanks to writings, newspapers, letters, and other forms of information that tell us what really happened in 1918. It tells you about the people from Oconomowoc who faced this incredible international challenge with courage, with conviction, and with sacrifice. We begin with two local women, Rose Ingersoll and Gladys Rodee. We find them in a house near downtown Oconomowoc in their kitchen one morning, sharing the news of the day. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go to their kitchen. It's September 1918.
It is a hot one out there. I can't believe it.
Hey, Gladys.
Oh, how you doing, Rose?
Okay.
Oh, it's another warm one out there, but I suppose winter's coming soon.
Well, I was just out in the garden. Oh, still lots of cucumbers left to be picked. I have to get those pickles canned before... Oh, my goodness. Gladys, would you look at this? Women's shoes downtown are up to $2.95 a pair. Who can afford that? Oh, and men's galoshes are up to 89 cents. I never thought I'd see the day. And you know what I just heard? There's a 7-room house on Anderson Street for sale for $3,000. Oh! Why, with payments like those, before we could own that, we'd both be old ladies.
Well, at least one of us would.
What's that?
Oh, nothing. Say, is there anything in there about furniture? That old couch of ours is just about worn out.
Oh, here's an ad for Likes Furniture. There's a nice goldenrod Davenport covered with Spanish leather for $21.65. I hope you have that kind of money. We sure don't.
Well, it just means like anything else. We're going to have to save as much as we can each week. Why, Arthur thinks that we should buy a bond each month to help with the war effort. I mean, I guess I agree. I'm just happy we have enough to eat. Not like those poor people in Europe. Why, did you know that the Germans ate nothing but turnips for an entire winter season because of the food shortage? And with that blockade, they're hardly getting any meat. And I read that they're only eating an eighth of what they used to before the war.
Oh, my. Well, you know, we've certainly done our part. Meatless Mondays, wheatless Wednesdays, driving less, saving coal, oh, and knitting to send overseas and sending packages to our soldiers. Oh, and of course, rationing flour and sugar. I don't know what more we can do.
Well, don't forget about saving the fruit pits.
Yes, why do we do that anyway?
I guess they extract the carbon to make gas masks.
Oh, that's right, that awful gas. What a terrible way to wage war. Horrible, those poor boys and their poor families.
Yes, indeed. I hope it ends soon, but those Germans are so stubborn. Say, does it say anything in there about how to can without sugar? I was thinking about giving that a try.
No, but look here, Gladys. Did you know that hens fare better than roosters in cold weather?
Why do you care? You don't have any chickens?
No, but they fascinate me and I love eggs.
Oh, Rose, all this talk about food is making me hungry. I'm just glad our boys in the military have enough to eat. Why, you know, they need their strength, especially those poor boys in the trenches over in France.
Yeah. Oh, and it also says that fertilized eggs keep longer. I didn't know that.
What?
Yes, and look here, late molting hens, oh, they are better layers than early molting hens. And look here, it says to get rid of chicken's lice, you rub its head with Vaseline. Fascinating.
Rose, is there anything in that paper? Any news except news about chickens?
Oh, sure, let's see. Ooh, there's a Reverend W. Haas that will be installed at St. Paul's on Sunday. And the Bill McNulty family of Delafield has an incredible 6 sons serving in the military at the same time. And that has got to be some sort of a record. Oh, and it says instead of jewelry, it would be better to buy war bonds and give them this Christmas. And of course, to shop for them early. Oh, and look at this. They're trying to get women to bake what's called victory bread. It's a recipe that doesn't use wheat. They said to use corn to substitute the wheat for corn or oats, barley, rice, rye flour, or potatoes. Yes, they said that the wheat is needed to make bread for our soldiers and lots of civilians too. Boy, if it weren't for the United States, there'd be a lot of starving people in lots of countries. Well, like France and Britain and Belgium and Italy, our allies, of course, and lots of neutral countries, too.
Now, Rose, how do you
Oh, hey, Denmark, Norway, Spain, and, well, the reason I know it is I have the radio on, Gladys. I listen to it all day while I'm working around the house. You know, it keeps me company till Chester returns home from overseas.
Hey, here's another one of those propaganda ads from the government. It says women should pray hard, work hard, sleep hard, and play hard. Well, it makes sense to me, but there's not much of that play hard going on around here. Not with this war going on. And the government is getting pretty serious about hoarding. Why, it says here that if you're caught with more than your share of flour, you can be fined up to $5,000 or spend 2 years in jail. My Lord, that's pretty serious stuff. Oh, and there's the coal shortage. It says here, we're 58 million tons short on coal. It says, no coal, no power. No power, no guns. No guns, no victory. Therefore, save coal.
Oh, we must have saved some that last winter. Oh, why, with those temperatures and all that snow, Chester and I burned whatever wood we could get our hands on, and you know there wasn't much of that to be had. Well, I guess we're just going to eat less and be as cold for as long as this war goes on. Gladys, can't go on much longer, can it? Maybe our boys can bring it to an end before the year is over. Wouldn't that be a wonderful Christmas present for all of us?
Lord knows we are all sick of this war.
Yes.
Hey, look here. Here's a testimony from Peter Miller over on 509 Westover Street. It says here about a medical condition that he had and how he cured it. It says here, I had to get up often at night to pass kidney secretions. It says, I noticed that they were highly colored and filled with sediment. It says, I suffered from a lame and aching back and I couldn't rest. But after taking 3 boxes of Doan's kidney pills that I got from Race's Pharmacy, I was able to get the rest I needed, and the kidney secretions cleared up, and the lame and achiness of my back went away.
That's disgusting!
Disgusting? It can't be disgusting. It's in the paper, Rose, and you know they don't put anything disgusting in the paper.
Oh, all right, fine, Gladys. Well, you know, my back's been acting up lately. Maybe I ought to try some of those Doan pills.
Say, you want to walk to the pharmacy right now? We can stop by Likes and look at that leather couch. Why, even if we can't afford to buy it, we could always sit on it for a while.
Yeah, sounds good to me. Oh, and we can stop by the egg stand. I think I'm almost out of them. Let's go.
Rose, you and your chicken.
Oh, I love eggs. You know that.
Oh, I know.
In any war, the burden of the war is never equally distributed. As usual, the heaviest burden is paid by those who actually participate in the war in a direct way. The soldiers, the sailors, and the Marines, who often endured unimaginable hardships while they also faced the possibility every day of either being wounded or killed. But their sacrifices are well chronicled in American history. There's another layer of sacrifice and suffering that needs to be mentioned here, however, ladies and gentlemen, and that's the families of those that are sent overseas. The mothers and the fathers, the brothers and the sisters, the wives and the children of those who actually serve. Their grief and their pain is emotional rather than physical, but like the physical wounds suffered in wartime, those wounds can go on long after the bombs and the guns have been silenced. It's late summer 1917 and the United States is in need of a lot of manpower. It's begun to draft young men. And among them is my own paternal grandfather, Reinhold Reich. At the time, he was 23 years of age. He was the son of Gustav and Wilhelmina Reich, who lived on a farm in Hellenville. They emigrated to the United States when they were only teenagers. But now we find them a couple of decades later, They're on their farm, resting after a day's work, and discussing the fact that their son, Reinhold, has just been drafted into the Army and may soon be on the front lines in Europe.
Did you check on the chickens, Gus?
Yeah.
With that fox prowling around at night, I sure hope I got them all back in the hen house after supper.
Yeah. Chickens are fine, and the cows have been milked, and the calves have been watered, and everything is all good.
Good. It's still kind of hot out there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Would you like something cold to drink?
Thank you for asking, but I had some water in the barns.
Good. Say, Pa, tomorrow morning, I think I'm going to rub a little Vaseline on each of my chickens' heads. Wouldn't want any lice on them, you know?
So now where did you hear that?
I didn't hear it. I read it right here in the paper. It's a big problem, you know?
I think the only problem is that you read too much. I think next thing you know, you'll want to put little jackets on them in the winter time.
Now, you're just being silly. But I do think we need to be on the lookout for that fox. And, Pa, is there something bothering you? You've got that look on your face like something's wrong. What is it?
It's nothing. I guess I'm just a little concerned about the war. That's all.
Well, a terrible thing, terrible thing. I don't know why countries have to go to war anyway, and government wants our son, Reinhold, to fight in it, and against Germans, too. Oh, God, have mercy.
Sure, I am definitely worried about Reinhold, but it's much more than that.
Like what?
I made the mistake of reading the paper in the barn, and looks like, you've seen the looks, you've heard the whispers, you've seen the looks on people's faces that know we are German. It's not easy being German these days.
I know, it's not good, but is there something more that bothers you?
Well, right here, some states say they are going to ban the German language. Not our state, thank the Lord, in Wisconsin, but some others. There's also talk about locking up Germans in what they call internment camps. Who knows? They are already doing it, I think, but what if we are next? What happens to our family?
But we haven't done anything. We've been loyal, hard-working Americans for 30 years. We're real Americans now.
Not everyone believes that, unfortunately. Did you know that they attacked a man up in Ashland, right here in Wisconsin, just because he was German, and because he was teaching German at a college, doing his job? They tarred and feathered the poor man. And down in Illinois, a bunch of drunken men dragged another German fellow into the streets. And you know what they did to him?
No, what?
They hung him from a tree.
Oh, that's just horrible things. But, Pa, do you think that could happen to us right here in our town, right here where we live?
I don't know. But we must be careful now. We don't know. We are safe on this farm, I believe. But when we go into town, we have to watch what we say and how we talk. We have to protect our family.
All right, I know. I will be careful, Pa. But I know you worry so much about Reinhold, and I worry about him too. I don't know if he'll ever come back to us.
Well, how do we not worry? He's in the army now, and before we know it, he will be in the trenches in France, fighting for his life. He's a man now, of course, but I think he can take care of himself, and I hope and pray. But even the best soldiers can die in wartime. And we must now trust God to protect our son.
I don't know how I'll bear it. I really don't know. A mother never wants to have to see her son go to a war and not know if he'll come back. That's just terrible.
Mein Lieber, it's terrible for so many reasons. The deaths of so many young men, the misery it has caused for so many innocent people in Europe, the cost to every country involved. But you know that we are more involved in most families because it is our Reinhold that has been sent to war to fight the country that you and I were born in. He may very well be shooting at his cousins, sons of my brothers and sisters. How do they expect him to do that? I don't know, it's just awful. I know he has been called and he must do this, but it is an awful price to pay for our family.
I am so worried. I worry already, and he's still just in training. 23 years old. He is a man, like you say, but such a young man, and he doesn't belong to me anymore. He belongs to this government of ours, and it will do with him as it pleases. And all we can do is pray that Reinhold survives over there and he comes home safely to us.
I don't know, Mama. This war, I hate it, and I don't know why our country got involved in it.
I know, Paul. All we can do is call on our faith to God to give us comfort and wisdom and protection for our boy Reinhold and all these other young boys out there. And all we can do is pray and continue about our business and work the farm and raise our children. And Reinhold is in God's hands.
Well, and you have been such a comfort. I so appreciate the care that you give me and our family and our children. But I think what we need to do is get some rest, because those cows will be calling my name early in the morning, and the sun will be coming up way too early.
Oh, and those chickens will be happy to see me too. You know, after I've done sorting and packing these eggs, I think I'm going to go to town and I will get us some good coffee, and I'll get the kids some candy too, and I won't forget the Vaseline so I can rub it on each of my little chickens' heads tomorrow.
You and your Vaseline. Come on, Momo.
Gute Nacht, Schatzi.
Gute Nacht, Mäuslein.
Well, Reinhold Reich did indeed go to Europe and fought with the famed 150th Machine Gun Battalion, part of the United States Army, as did many men from Oconomowoc. And then one afternoon, his unit was attacked by the Germans with mustard gas, and his eyes were injured. He was sent to a hospital for treatment and sent home. It was assumed the injuries were temporary, but they were not. Eventually, Reinhold Reich went blind at the age of 39 while living at his home in Oconomowoc, Wisconsin on Oakwood Avenue. 25 years later, his two sons would be called upon to defend America in World War II. My Uncle Warren was a member of the Merchant Marines. My father, Fred, was a member of the United States Navy and sailed the South Pacific. And wouldn't you know, 25 years later, it was my turn to go to war. I ended up in Vietnam. Reinhold Reich lived the remainder of his life in Oconomowoc. He tried for disability payments, but despite the fact that he had been awarded a Purple Heart already for his injuries, despite the fact that there were affidavits, despite the fact that there were eyewitnesses, he was always denied those disability payments. And it didn't help that the hospital where he was treated in France burned to the ground, taking with it all of his medical records. Reinhold Reich died in 1946 at the age of 52. He died of a heart attack at his Oakwood Avenue home. He's buried at Summit Cemetery along with my grandmother Gertrude, and very close to his parents, Gus and Wilhelmina Reich. You know, it takes a lot of money to fight a war, and the United States in World War I was certainly no exception. They had to buy guns and ammunition. They had to outfit a very large army. They pulled a lot of men off their jobs, and therefore those jobs had to be filled by women. There was an awful lot of moving around, a lot of inconvenience, and a lot of heartache. To convince Americans to make that sacrifice, however, the United States government would send out people to talk to the Americans about their need to sacrifice. These were propagandists, to tell the truth. They would typically go to small towns like Oconomowoc and go to the theater, like the LaBelle Theater in downtown Oconomowoc. There was always a couple of reels for each movie, and when the first reel was exhausted, it would take 4 minutes for the second reel to be prepped for the movie to begin again. And during those 4 minutes, those 4-minute men would jump up on stage and they would present some kind of propaganda on behalf of the government and the war effort. Now, of course, that's a long time ago. Those things are gone. And it would be nice to hear them, but again, they were exhausted 100 years ago. I tried to find a copy of those speeches, and I couldn't. But I've heard of something recently called the cloud. Did you ever hear of the cloud? Where things go up there somewhere, and they just kind of float around, they hang up there. And then if you're lucky, with the right kind of technology, you can draw them back down again. I'm not sure how that works, but I went to the store and I asked a woman, could she please sell me some sophisticated technological equipment to reach up in the crowd and bring back one of these 4-minute speeches. And she sold me this. It's an old-time radio. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try to get this radio to call down one of those 4-minute speeches from the cloud so that you have the opportunity to know what the people who lived in Oconomowoc listened to between the movie reels back in 1918. I'm going to turn it on here and try to adjust it and see if it will work, see if we can come up with one of those speeches. Comes quickly, doesn't it?
My name is Michael Duncan. What a pleasure it is to be here today to speak to you about your need to support the country's efforts to defeat our relentless and vicious enemies overseas. You have such a beautiful town here, and of course, you're thousands of miles away from the fighting in Europe. That's why it's hard for me to tell you this. You are in danger. This town, this state, this country, all in danger if the war against the Germans and their allies is lost. Well, first, let me tell you about that very aggressive and powerful country called Germany. It began the war by attacking its peaceful neighbors, and it has been fighting them ever since. Oh, and they have exhibited some horrible barbarism. Now, I know that there's going to be women and children listening today, so I'm not going to give you specific details of the horrible actions of German soldiers throughout the war. You already know that the Germans introduced poison gas as a weapon on the battlefield. And did you know that they were the first to use horrible weapons like flamethrowers too? There is something about this country that has no respect for the rules of war or for humanity in general. And that's why it's important that this barbaric country be defeated. Now, I know some of you are thinking there are wonderful citizens of this community who came from Germany and have become loyal citizens. And that many others were born to German immigrants, and they too are loyal to the red, white, and blue. Good for them. We need them to help us win this fight and to provide the money and materials needed to bring the war to a successful conclusion. But there are some people among us who remain loyal to Germany, and that's the problem. Well, why? Well, think about it. Have you heard somebody think about Germany? They can hurt us because win or lose, it will always be thousands of miles away. Wrong. Remember, Canada is fighting alongside England, of course, and if England is defeated, the Germans will come to occupy a portion of North America, right where we live. The uncivilized attitudes and actions of the Germans will be located right across our borders, and the threat from its army will no longer be thousands of miles away. We will be looking at it face to face. Is that what you want? Is that something that we can allow? Of course not. We need to do everything we can to win the war in Europe, but at the same time, weeding out those among us who are loyal to the Kaiser in Germany instead of being loyal to this country. And they're out there. And there's every reason to believe that they live among us. Yes, even right here in Oconomowoc. Have you heard somebody speaking in German? Why would they do that if they live in a country that speaks English? That's reason enough for suspicion. Sometimes you might even hear them express their opposition to the war, or worse yet, that they support Germany in the war. If you hear that, you should know that the enemy actually lives among us, and that every utterance of suspicion and disloyalty should be reported to the authorities. Don't remain silent. Tell someone. The safety and security of your country may depend on it. Meantime, do all you can to help provide the money, the food, and the munitions needed to win the war. A war that cannot and will not be won unless you at home make the necessary sacrifices. We need you to buy the bonds which help supply the war effort, and to save on food and fuel. Continue with at least one wheatless and meatless day a week. Wear heavier clothes. happens, and it will, with your help, then we will celebrate and return to a more relaxed and abundant lifestyle. But until then, be a patriot. Do your part. Help your government and your brave fighting boys overseas to defeat the Huns and save the world. Stay alert. Help your beloved country stay alive. And now back to that patriotic song by George S. Cohen, Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Ladies and gentlemen, the voice of Michael Duncan. Mr. Michael Duncan, are you here with us today? No, he's not. Is he? He is here. Oh, thank you, sir, very, very much for your contribution. By the way, he doesn't always talk like that. I'm sure he'd be quite normal when you talk to him. So we appreciate that. It was excellently done. Rebecca, are we ready for a short intermission? Yeah. Okay, I guess we're ready for a short intermission. Ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity to go outside, and if you have a few dollars on you, or there are a few items out there for sale, again, all profits will go to the Fisher House, and we would appreciate your support. Have a refreshment, and come back and see us in a few minutes for the second half of Cooney Goes Over There. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Bill. Huh?
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. I'm getting my mic on. Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
The heck, faulty headset.
No, I'm telling you. Check 1 2.
Remember you swapped out the color.
Yeah, I just wondering why it's when I've got a mute. Check 1 2. 3 4.
I can hear you. Is this mic on?
Something's hot.
Check, 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 check. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check. We're getting a little feedback.
That'll teach us.
Check, check. Now I'm on.
Post. Colors. Present. Arms. Order. Arms. Right. Hit. Forward. Hold.
You may be seated. Thank you. That was color guard from post 2260 in Oconomowoc. The post is called Salveson Moose Abrahamson for a reason. Those were 3 men from Oconomowoc who died during World War I. As we said already, the highest price paid in wartime is always among those who actually served in the war, as well as their families. And sometimes that pain of a loss can be so profound. Microphone. Is it not working, guys? No. Okay. Thank you. Do we have liftoff now? All right. Thank you. I've learned as I've gotten older, these forgetful periods come more often. I'm sure you've never had that experience. Okay. Technology is fun. As I was saying, the highest price paid is sometimes extremely profound, as it was on November 11th, 1918, while everybody was celebrating the end of the war here in Oconomowoc. A man named H. Atwater received the news that his only son, Alan, had been killed in Europe. Alan was 19 years old. He was killed in the last battle of the war. I found out today that prior to the armistice at 11 a.m., 3,000 men on all sides of the war were killed before that armistice went into effect. Poor Mr. Atwater had lost his wife only 4 years earlier. It was the same misery for approximately 115,000 other families across the United States as word of their losses came back from those forbidden fields and those terrible trenches of Europe in World War I, in northern France and southern Germany. Some of the fallen were transported home for burial. Some of the fallen were buried in Europe. Listen now, as one Oconomowoc veteran tells his story. In fact, several do. And we'll start with Captain Carl Lugville. Lugville had to endure the hardships of the trench warfare like everyone else, but he was also called upon to lead other men in battle, to help them to do their part to win the war against the Germans. Lugville would be forced to endure the awful conditions while also looking after his own men. Here he recounts some of his own experiences and some of his reactions to being a soldier on the front line as told to you through the eyes of an Oconomowoc soldier.
Good afternoon. My name is Captain Carl Lugville. I had the honor of serving as the lead officer in Company M when our Oconomowoc boys were in France, fighting the so-called war to end all wars. I was a lieutenant serving under our regular captain, Anthony Dursey, until he was injured in a freak truck accident while we were marching along a road one day. He suffered his injuries on the first day of a battle in which another Cooney boy, Sergeant Martin Mose, was killed. I was one of the youngest captains in the Army during the war, having completed my tour of duty at age 22. Despite that, my men seemed to know that I was dedicated to their safety and welfare, considering our dangerous circumstances, and they respected me and treated me accordingly. Leading them and looking after them was an immense responsibility, and I was deeply hurt when any of them were seriously wounded or killed. I served with as I served with Company M for several months at the border with Mexico in 1917 and eventually joined my company in going overseas. In late July of 1918, Captain Dursey was injured, and that's when I inherited the position of company commander. It wasn't long before I felt the weight of command on my shoulders when on August 3rd, a Cooney man and another lieutenant, Edwin L. Jones, was seriously wounded in action and died a short time later. I had some very close calls, so it's a wonder that I was never wounded or killed. One time, a piece of shrapnel actually sailed through my coattail, but missed my leg, for which I was very grateful. Other times, I was simply splashed with mud as the earth took up the blow of the exploding shell. Somehow, I came out of it in one piece. Many others weren't so lucky. Some paid the ultimate price. The war cost the lives of 10 men serving under me, including from Oconomowoc, the Oconomowoc Area 11. Besides Lieutenant Jones and Sergeant Mose, our company lost Private George Rosh, who was wounded in combat and later died. Herbert Abrahamson, who suffered a severe gas attack and later died of pneumonia. And Harvey Salveson, who died from appendicitis in a hospital in France. And then came that fateful day, November 11th, when we were engaged in a battle with the Germans along the Meuse River. Suddenly, a runner approached and told us that the armistice had been signed and the war was over. I thought he was out of his mind with fear, and soon another man confirmed what he had told me, and the celebrations began. Men threw their helmets in the air, left their foxholes, and began to dance and shout. I eventually would come back to Oconomowoc to resume my civilian life and get married to Helen Jacobs, have 2 sons, and spend 35 years working as a jeweler at the Nottebohm jewelry store. Later, I would have a watch repair business for 10 years. I would come to the end of my life at the age of 64, dying of a heart attack at our family's home at 226 3rd Street in Oconomowoc. The Enterprise headline announcing my death would grant the title for which I would always be known and forever be proud, Army Captain Carl Lugfield. Thank you.
I'm going to try to find a new sweet spot here. Is this working well? It should. Okay. Our second veteran is a name you should recognize. It's Wilkinson. Dr. M.R. Wilkinson, Dr. Michael Wilkinson, who served in World War I and who later, of course, with his sons, founded the Wilkinson Clinic. Some of his kin are still around the area and still active, and I believe that one of them, Gert Wilkinson, are you with us here today? Gert is a granddaughter. There she is right there. Thank you, Gert. Gert, forgive me if I mention your age. I believe you're a 90-year-old Oconomowoc treasure. Is that right? Are you 90? We all want to be 90 someday, Gert. That's good. Don't you have a 91 now? Do you have a daughter or granddaughter with you? Granddaughter? So that would be a great-granddaughter of... His great-granddaughter is with us here, too. Where's she? Oh, there she is back there. Okay, thank you very much. All right. And a third relative of Dr. Wilkinson is his grandson, Mark. And Mark is with us today playing the part of his grandfather. And here he comes, and I want you, ladies and gentlemen, to note the fact that he's wearing the uniform his father actually wore while serving in the Medical Corps in World War I. Playing Dr. Michael Wilkinson, his grandson, Mark.
Hello. I'm Dr. M.R. Wilkinson. I'm a 53-year-old resident of Oconomowoc, and undoubtedly its oldest veteran of the recently concluded war, World War I, the Great War. I served in the Army for 21 months, examining and treating young men who actually went overseas and fought the Germans and the Austrians until the armistice was declared on November 11th of this year. But before, I tell you about my Army experiences, let me tell you something about me and my family and our collective life here in Oconomowoc. I was born in the state of Maine in 1864 during the American Civil War to parents who came from Ireland. I moved here with my parents to Delafield on a farm when I was 12 years old. After I finished 8th grade, I worked on the farm with my father until I was 21. That's when I decided to try college. And to make a long story short, I didn't stop studying until I had earned my license to practice medicine in 1893. A year later, it was my great pleasure to make Josephine Lingeman my wife. I affectionately call her Feenie now. Her father was an immigrant from Germany. We make our home at 38 South Main Street. My office is in the house, and from there, rain or shine, hot or cold, I travel to the homes of my patients in my buggy or sleigh, with my horse pulling, when I'm inside with the leather medical bag. Today we are the proud parents of 7 wonderful children. Francis, 22, who served in the Army with me during the war, along with Helen, John, Donald, Mary, Clarence, and the youngest, Philip. We attend St. Jerome's Church in Oconomowoc, and we've made it our mission to serve our community as faithfully and with as much energy as the Lord will allow. Eventually, 4 of my sons would become doctors, and I'm very proud that they chose as well to dedicate their lives to doing as Christ called us, to serve others to the best of our abilities. And of course, many of you come to know our family through the founding and operation of the Wilkinson Clinic here in Oconomowoc, later Summit. Now let me tell you a bit about my service days. In the spring of 1917, I was commissioned as an officer in the United States Army, as a lieutenant. Eventually, I was promoted to captain. My first assignment was at Fort Harrison, Indiana, one of nearly half a dozen Army posts in the South and East, at which I would serve for nearly 2 years before being discharged. From the very beginning, my life seemed to be split in two. Half was still with my wife and family, and half was in the Army. Thanks to the many letters we exchanged over that time, I would explain in great detail about my daily life of long hikes, along lines of men I would be examining, and all the other experiences I was having. Meanwhile, Feenie would be at home, tending to our household, reporting back to me about patients, passing out medications, keeping me up to date about their conditions. They were a very busy 21 months. Accommodations, sometimes sparse, like the times when we froze in the winter while sleeping in barracks, and there was nothing for the stove. I remember one spell when I slept in my pajamas, under my blankets, under my bathrobe, under my overcoat, and later I got a hat and scarf also worn to bed. Then there were the days when the South was swelteringly hot. Soldiers, wherever they are, learn to take the weather as it is. And then there was food. Sometimes it was quite good. Sometimes not so good. I remember writing to Feenie once from Fort Sheridan, Alabama, and telling her the last evening, the spaghetti soup looked to me like the swill we used to feed the hogs on the farm. And like the weather, soldiers take the mess offerings as they come. While I was happy to be serving my country, I missed being home to see my loving wife and wonderful children, and I was not there to take them on sleigh rides, help them with schoolwork, and of course, it was hard to be gone when Phil was just entering his formative years. He would bring a smile to my face with his drawings, and I would ask him to write and tell me what Santa brought him for Christmas. Sometimes I was reminded how fortunate I was. At Fort Oglethorpe in Georgia, I was very near to a POW camp where captured Germans were being held. Their separation from their families was more dramatic than mine. As my service days in the war came to a close, I was proud to read the letters in the Enterprise that told of the brave deeds being done by men from Oconomowoc, how they were helping to turn the tide in favor of the Allies, and that connection kept my spirits up. I remember writing to Feeney saying, "Cooney can be proud of its boys." When it was all over, I was proud too. Proud of my family, proud of my community, and proud of the service I was able to render in the Medical Corps of the United States Army. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wilkinson. Dr. Wilkinson's skills and service kept him in the United States during his 22 months of service, but other men from Oconomowoc in this area were called to have a more direct input in the war. They were sent overseas, and among them was a seasoned veteran by the name of George Barrand. His harrowing experience tells you of the misery and the sacrifices which were required of men who actually went to the front lines. The British, the French, and the Americans on one side, the Germans and their allies on the other. Barrons was there when the war raged on over that no man's land. Listen now as he takes you there personally to the front lines in this chilling testimony. George Barrand.
Hello, my name is Lieutenant George Barrand. My home is located in Oconomowoc at 125 Luther Avenue, right across the street from Dr. Martin Luther Church, and just about a block from the railroad depot and 2 blocks from downtown. I serve in the National Guard, the Army, if you will, and I am proud to carry the rank of lieutenant. I am older than many of the men who served in World War I. In fact, I was 37 years old when I was crawling from trench to trench over that deadly and dangerous ground where the war dragged on for long years. Of course, as an American soldier, I only served there for 1. But believe me, that was long enough. I was born in 1879, and I was 19 years old when I became the charter member of a unit called Company M, 150th Machine Gun Battalion. That was in 1898. I would remain in the Guard until I was called to active duty in the war. There I joined Company B. As it turned out, I was the only charter member of Company M to serve in World War I. By the time the Great War rolled around, I was already past the age of 35. But I was still willing and able to do whatever the Army asked me to do, including time spent in the front, in those muddy, rat and lice-infested trenches. Now, let me tell you a little something about my time at the front. As the leader of several machine gun units, I had to move regularly from one trench to another to provide my soldiers with instructions, to keep them informed of our situation and our plans, and to check on their well-being. It was a great responsibility, a life and death responsibility that I took very seriously. And of course, life at the front was anything but comfortable. It was terribly hot. It was terribly cold, depending on the time of year. In fact, much of Europe's climate, after all, was much like ours here in Wisconsin. Also, the rain. It had nowhere to go when it fell, except to the bottom of those trenches. We all got pretty good at bailing after a good rain. Then there was the smell. It was something foul and ungodly. It could drop a man to his knees. The rest of us simply got used to it. Whenever the wind blew, the smell of decaying flesh, both men and horses, rolled across no man's land. The potholes from exploding shells, often contained the rotting bodies of those who had been killed. The noise was another horrible ingredient of our man-made recipe for human misery. Try sleeping through a cannon barrage that lasts for hours and causes men to yell every word at the top of their lungs just to communicate something. My closest call probably came on March 18th, when I was shaken badly by the falling artillery and a gas attack that snuck up on me. It caused me to lose my eyesight. It was during the time when I was making my rounds, checking on my soldiers. I'll never forget that night. The Germans started their bombardment at 5:30 and kept it up for hours. They threw everything at us except the rolling kitchens. No one was killed, but we had several close calls. I was sent to a field hospital with burns to my body, and I was blind for 7 days. I must have been a mess, because when I read a French newspaper one day, I saw that I had been listed as severely wounded. But soon I was healing up. My lungs seemed to clear, but my eye problems don't look like they're ever going to go away. Sometimes it's hard to see, especially in the sun, but I'll get along all right. The important thing is that I got to go back to my company. If someone was gone too long, they would replace him with another officer, and I did not want that. To remain with the company would probably mean promotion to from second lieutenant to first lieutenant before long. By early April 1918, I was able to return to my duty station, and I remained with Company B until the end of the war on November 11th, 1918. Somehow I survived until Armistice Day, and I made it back to my home on Luther Avenue, here in Oconomowoc. It was a day I'll never forget. It was kind of a miracle. One day I remember when 3 shells hit so close to me that when I was knocked to the ground, it actually took my breath away. I thought about my home and my family, and I wondered if I'd ever see them again. But I did get home. The war got too many of us, but it did not get me. I would eventually move north to Beaver Dam and died there of a heart attack in 1940. I was 61 years old. Thank you, and God bless America.
Well, in the process of writing Cooney Goes Over There, which I did late last year, I became inspired to write a song, which is now going to be presented as soon as we get somebody up here to sing it. It's looking good. It's looking good. People are moving toward the stage. I can do a lot of improvising. That's not one for me. I wrote this song, I suppose. I was trying to figure out why I did write it, why it came to me. It's a bit of an anti-war song. And I thought, why in the world did this come out of me? When I went to serve in the military, I served willingly. I served because it was my duty, and I felt as an American I should go and do my duty. But I was the oldest of 5 children. I have 3 younger brothers. And when I was serving in Vietnam and got back home again, I realized that the war was not over. It was going to go on and on and on, and I didn't want any of my brothers going over there. So that's what this song is about. It's called Don't Go Over There, Dear Brother. Presented today by Mr. Ralph Garcia, who will be singing it, Carl Kay on piano, and this wonderful community choir. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go over there, dear brother.
Don't come over here, dear brother. Stay back home where you belong. This war that seemed to be so right has somehow turned out wrong. The glory and excitement that once swirled in my brain
has disappeared into a haze of bullets and blood and pain. Don't come over here, dear brother, this is not the place for you. Just tend the farm and do the things I can no longer do, until the day that I return and tell you what I've done. Just pray that I'm still living when this terrible war is won. Don't come over here, dear brother, though I know you want to fight. But you should know it's harder here to tell what's wrong or right. And life here in these trenches is as bad as it can be. Don't trade the life that you have now for this life of misery. Last week I had to kill a man. I stabbed him with my knife. You'll never know how wrong it seems to take a human life. But it was either him or me as he stared in disbelief. And now I fear that I shall live a life of endless grief. Don't come over here, dear brother, though I know that you are brave. But think of all the pain you'll cause if they send you to your grave. Just stay right there and just do your best. It's for mother that you must care. To lose even a single son may be more than she can bear. Pray for me, pray for me. Pray that all this terrible fighting will soon end. Pray for me, pray for me. Pray that all our boys will soon be home again. Please don't tell our dear, dear mother about these things I write to you. Just tell her that I'm doing fine and that I'll be home soon. Stay by her side, dear brother, chase away her darkest fear. And promise her with all your heart you won't come over here. If I should fall into the dust and pay here for my sins, remember that I love you and that we'll meet again. Don't come over here, dear brother. Don't come here now that you know. And remember, my dear brother, I will always love you so. Pray for me, pray for peace. Pray that all this terrible fighting will soon end. Pray for me, pray for peace. Pray that all our boys will soon be home again.
Thank you, Oconomowoc Community Choir. Mr. Carl Kay on piano and featuring Mr. Ralph Garcia, singing Don't Come Over Here, Dear Brother. Well, finally today, we hear from the Honorable Mayor of Oconomowoc, circa 1918. His name is Hugo Ernst. As the duly elected head of the City of Oconomowoc government, it's his job to lead his community through the trying times of World War I. Various contributions by the citizens of Oconomowoc are listed by our mayor. His words and his tone express the pride felt by the City of Oconomowoc as it came to the fore with its money and with its other forms of support for the war. The support that they sent to our boys over there. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honorable Mayor of the City of Oconomowoc, Hugo Ernst.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hugo Ernst, and I'm the duly elected mayor of this fine city that we call Oconomowoc. Now that the year 1918 is nearly gone, and I want to tell you that a new year is coming in, I'd like to share with you a few examples of some ways that our little community helped to sustain the war in Europe, and how our citizens of all ages pitched in to help our boys overseas to defeat the enemy and bring peace to Europe and the rest of the world as well. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't tell you a little bit about myself, would I? I was born and raised in Oconomowoc. Yes, and for the past 8 years, my wife Bessie and I have made this community our marital town. I belong to the Congregational Church, yes, and some of you may know me from the Ernst and Thompson grocery store and retail business on Main Street, or perhaps from my tire and auto business as well, correct? It's been my pleasure, of course, to serve not one but 2 terms as your mayor. And it's also my pleasure to share with you an overview of the truly wonderful things that all the citizens in Oconomowoc responded to World War I. Well, it's hard to tell you exactly where to begin because there are so many people and groups that deserve the credit. But I suppose I'll start with the big picture, yes? That usually involves money, yes, because it takes a lot of money to conduct a war overseas. I want to tell you that the Oconomowoc Enterprise just reported to us last week that all the citizens of our communities, and that includes Ashippun, Summit, Delafield, Dousman, and of course Concord as well, they all combined together to raise $1.2 million to help the cause, which includes the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and the government, of course, through the sales of war bonds. Well, think about that. Now, that accounts for nearly $100 for every man, woman, and child in the Oconomowoc area. And if we fast forward, say, to the year 2018, that would equivocate to about $1,800 per person. Wow! Yes. But money isn't the only amazing story I'd like to share with you here tonight. It wasn't just with America's entry into the war. No, it began months and months ago with our local citizens contributing for the people overseas and to the army over there to help them. We fed them. We took care of them into the winter as well. Even the high school girls got involved. Yes, they were busy knitting socks and knitting scarves and wristlets to be shipped overseas. The boys pitched in. They were released in April from school so they could help the local farmers put in their crops. The women, of course, we can't forget the women, right? They helped too because they were conserving food and fuel for the effort. They also pitched in at the local factories, helping out because the boys went overseas to war. They were also down at the office of Mr. Edgerton at the Bank of Oconomowoc and Mr. Kettenhoffen at the First National Bank, asking for some extra land in which that they could plant some gardens. Our local businesses kicked in as well. Yes, it was the local barbers that decided that to conserve fuel, they would not open their shops until 10:30 in the morning. Soon after, all the local businesses kicked in as well, let me tell you. Even the churches did their part. They consolidated services. The Baptists, the Methodists, and the Congregational Church all decided to join forces together and have their services together at a different site each Sunday in which to conserve fuel, and less fuel would be consumed. Some of these things were especially difficult this past year. Oh, let me tell you, in last January, for example, we had over 50 inches of snow, and the temperature dropped to 12 degrees below zero. Oh, people were in agony, but they persevered, let me tell you. They were brave, and they were determined. And they showed rallies like the one at September 16th this year. Let me tell you what a display of patriotism. Oh, my goodness. It was the largest patriotic assembly in Oconomowoc. It made us all proud to be Americans and proud to become citizens of this fine area. We did have our setbacks, of course. For example, that dreaded Spanish flu epidemic, which did leave its mark on our community. For example, one day last year, our schools had over 177 students out with the flu in that one day. We had to close the school for a couple of weeks in order to let that flu pass. We even had to close off public meetings just so we could let that thing stop and let the flu just subside. It was a deadly, deadly epidemic. Finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't shine the brightest light on all those brave men who put on the colors of their country, put on their uniform, and went off to overseas to fight a deadly and determined enemy. Many of them were very young, some of them not so young. Dr. Wilkinson, who in his 50s left his local business behind, and he went and he answered the call. Many suffered horrible conditions over there in France, living in the trenches in the horrible, horrible weather. And they were suffered by the daily pounding of the German guns. Some paid the ultimate price for the freedom, for our freedom and the freedom of others. And so their name all belongs to Oconomowoc history. History, names like Moose, Jones, Rosh, Abramson, Salveson, Perry, Bennett, Tenbreck. The day it all ended, November 11th, 1918. We celebrated and we prayed that this war to end all wars would finally live up to its name. The world had suffered so much depravity, so much violence and suffering to go through all that again. But it did. Showed the heart and generosity of one little tiny community in Wisconsin who delivered beyond anyone's expectations with its patriotism, its endurance, and its over-the-top generosity. That's Oconomowoc. It's a marvelous, wonderful, beautiful, glorious, magical town. Don't you agree? Well, God bless you all, and God bless Oconomowoc. Thank you.
You have my vote, Mr. Mayor. Well, after years of supporting its allies, and after a year and a half of direct involvement in World War I, the United States finally heard the glorious news that the armistice had been signed in Europe, and this terrible fighting in Europe had finally come to an end. 100 years ago today, on November 11th, 1918, the guns fell silent on the Western Front. The terrible killing and destruction had finally come to an end. Here in Oconomowoc, a giant headline on the front page of the Oconomowoc Enterprise read simply, "War Over." And in the article that followed, it said, "The joy of our citizens knows no bounds. Every face has a smile." What came later that day was a spontaneous parade down the streets of Oconomowoc featuring the marching band from the St. John's Military Academy in Delafield. It said it marched along to, quote, "the cheers of the throngs which crowded the sidewalks." World War I was finally over. Can I have the cast of tonight's presentation come forward, please? Are you all dressed successfully here for presentation before a public audience? None of you have gotten undressed? Good, very good. Here they are. Ladies and gentlemen, my friends who participated, my new friends and some old friends who participated as the cast in Cooney Goes Over There. Here they are. Thank you. Scoot off to the side now, guys. Your checks are in the mail. Thank you. We hope you've enjoyed this. You'll get something, Ralph. You'll get what's coming to you. Must be fantastic. We hope you've enjoyed our dramatization here this evening. Of course, because of my family's participation in the war and the things that happened to us as a result of our participation in various wars, your presence here to help me celebrate and recognize Veterans Day has been most meaningful to me, and I thank you all for coming out today. Now for our finale song. It's called "And the Song Goes On," performed by the Silver Lake Singers, accompanied by Mark Karlstein and directed by Lynn Karlstein. Again, ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for coming here. Can I at last here ask that anybody who was connected to the families that were represented here on stage today kindly stand up. Any of the Ingersolls or the Roadies or anybody else, the Reichs, anybody else who is a member of the family, the extended family, the descendants, please stand up and be recognized now. Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. And I know it's been a long afternoon, and I know that it's getting late, but please do join us if you can for a few minutes at the reception that will follow here in the other room for drinks and for food and for the chance to chat with these actors. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the Silver Lake Singers.
Technology, you've mastered this now.
Look for green, Lynn. Look for green.
Dale, you're a genius. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and I know this has been a long afternoon with many memories, and you just start thinking, all of that sacrifice so long ago, and then all of that sacrifice not so long ago, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq. It goes on. And why does it go on? What are we looking for? What are we fighting for? That ability to be who we are, regardless of race, color, creed, and to follow our passions. And for these young people behind me, I hope that is always the case. And so, for better or worse, the song goes on.
Composed by
Green. Green. Okay, green. That had nothing to do with green. That had everything to do with John Kyle back there. Thank you for saving me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. Have a lovely afternoon bathed in the memories of the past. Good night.
Yes.